1904, an ancient manuscript was discovered in that year, revealing a long-forgotten kingdom that goes back to the 4th century BC. It is a book of counsel by its chief minister, Kautilya, to the king Chandragupta about how to govern his kingdom. The advice is about statecraft, military strategy, economics, integrity, and much more. It is not just a book, it is a library of ideas. What makes it relevant for us today is the emphasis on the sacred law of Rajadharma, emphasizing the moral duty of a king towards his subjects. To the question, what is Rajadharma? Kautilya answers, in the happiness of the subjects lies the benefit of the king, and what is beneficial to the subjects is his own benefit. The Arthashastra was generated for the good governance of a kingdom and will remain relevant for modern civilization to the extent that it reflects the moral heritage of mankind. Philip Tienko will have more to say on the subject of Kautilya's Arthashastra, contemporary relevance for ethics of good governance. A lawyer by profession, he holds postgraduate degrees in law and theology. As adjunct professor at the University of Malaya, he is committed to cross-disciplines of law, history, politics, and literature. He is also deeply involved in governance reforms in the corporate sector. Thank you.
In the year 2008, I was privileged to conduct a series of training programs sponsored by the International Finance Corporation World Bank at Mumbai. On that occasion, the discussion was on corporate governance to a group of very gifted Indian professionals working in various institutional capacities, both at the government level and also in the corporations. I was gifted at that place a book entitled Kautilya's Arthashastra, its contemporary relevance. My interest on this Indian thinker, Kautilya, was then aroused. I thought this thematic of Kautilya's Arthashastra and the governance thinking that he promulgated even way back then would have great relevance for our discourse. I have a sincere hope that in this presentation of mine, we who are citizens of the 21st century will be humbled with the thought that there was once a wise Indian thinker who wrote some 2,400 years ago and who wrestled with the issue of governance in the administration of a state and in the area of financial administration and commerce. Kautilya's wisdom can be a wellspring of inspiration to spur us towards striving for the greater good in both public and private spheres of our common life. Dr. Balaji Sadasiva tells the story well of how Kautilya mentored a young man, Chandragupta, who defeated the Nandas in the year 321 before Christ, anointed Chandragupta the emperor of India, and ushered in the Mauryan dynasty, all located at the city of Pataliputra, who was said to rival the splendor of Susa, the Persian city then ranked as one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. My presentation will touch on the major headings of public governance, wise counselors and allies of the ruler, financial governance, legal and justice governance, and advice to powerful elite. I will conclude with some brief reflections as to how Kautilya's thought may have relevance to us as contemporaries in the 21st century. In the realm of public governance, Kautilya may be classified as what we would call a realist. Kautilya's grasp that a ruler must be committed to the development and creation of wealth, exacting taxes only insofar it does not impair productivity, and the sovereign visiting penalties only on the corrupt and the indigent. Kautilya wrote, "The root of wealth is economic activity, and the lack of it brings material distress. In the absence of fruitful economic activity, both current prosperity and future growth are in the danger of destruction. The king shall populate the countryside by creating new villages on virgin lands or reviving abandoned village sites." Kautilya's famous maxim should reverberate on every ruler's mind. He said, "In the happiness of the people lies the ruler's happiness. Their welfare is the ruler's welfare. The ruler shall not consider only what pleases or benefits the ruler personally, but what is pleasing and beneficial to the people." Kautilya continues that the ruler must rule with righteousness and avoid being influenced by 6 enemies whose actions are detrimental to the public good: lust, anger, greed, infatuation, pride, and envy. Many rulers have been destroyed, Kautilya continued, by being in control by these enemies. Kautilya was a keen observer of behavior and conduct. He drew from the animal kingdom. It must have been from the time when he was an itinerant wanderer, when he chanced upon the young boy Chandragupta. As he observed the animal kingdom, he drew lessons from it, not unlike the sages of old. He said that a mad elephant mounted by an intoxicated mahout tramples on everything that it comes across. Likewise, a ruler devoid of the light of learning and advised by foolish ministers will fail. Whereas a righteous sovereign prizes discipline and learning. His concept was not unlike Plato's Philosopher's Kings, as outlined by that great Western thinker in the Republic. Kautilya wrote, "A ruler disciplined by learning will be interested in disciplining his subjects. Such a ruler will enjoy the earth unopposed and devoted to the welfare of all beings." His injunction that the rulership is grounded in character is surely valid. Such a ruler will engender loyalty rather than subservience born out of fear. This mirrors the requirement that a ruler cannot reign by sheer dictate of military might or legal authority, but in fact should arm himself with moral legitimacy. Kautilya wrote, "A ruler with loyal subject accomplishes his task even with a little help because of their cooperation." He further wrote, "A ruler with character can render even an unrenowned people happy, but a ruler of low character destroys a loyal and prosperous people." This focus of Kautilya on the people exemplifies modern political wisdom and thought. John Rawls, the quintessence 21st century political philosopher, has argued cogently for a laws of people that is based on the principle of his theory of justice in the allocation of goods equally while allowing maximum freedom for the subjects. Kautilya wrote, "A ruler who performs his duty righteously and protects his people properly goes to heaven. Quite the contrary is the case with one who does not protect his people or who metes out unjust punishment. A good ruler enforces the adherence of the people to the observance of duties prescribed for the four castes and the four stages of life, and rooting out all unrighteousness. So the ruler dispenses justice in all his functions." For Kautilya, the epitome of a just ruler is that he will be considered a world conqueror. He said, "A ruler who administers justice on the basis of four principles: righteousness, evidence, history of the case, and the prevalent law shall conquer the four corners of the world." Kautilya recognizes that in the real political world, there is need for realism and control. So Kautilya counseled that the ruler's secrets must be secure, but that the ruler shall ascertain also the weak spots of others, his enemies, just as the tortoise withdraws his limbs. A ruler hides his vulnerable parts, of which may be thrown open. The ruler is therefore no passive personage. When necessary, he is like a Hobbesian Leviathan. Just as a hidden snake, Kautilya wrote, emits poison on whatever is seen as a threat by it, the ruler emits poison of his anger on whomsoever from where danger is apprehended. So, Kautilya counsels, a ruler needs to surround himself not with sycophants or foolish advisers, but with wise counselors and allies. Kautilya advised that a wise ruler surrounds himself with appointed ministers who are learned and steeped with skills and the wisdom of statecraft. Kautilya's realism that whilst allies must be sought, they ought to be persons who could well be his friends. He cautioned, however, that even the best of friends or allies can change. An ally, he wrote, with increased power is untrustworthy, for success changes a person's mind. Prolonged relationship, therefore, can lead to usurpation of power and authority. There are those whose relationship with the rulers, Kautilya cautions, when established over a long period of time, are likely to completely usurp or take over everything from the ruler, and they may even pose as rulers themselves. In the area of financial governance, Kautilya was a realist again. His famous maxim, all undertakings depends on finance. One of the sharpest indictments that Kautilya visits upon the financial world is the curse of corruption. Kautilya depicts, again from nature, just as it is not possible to know, Kautilya notes, when a fish is moving in water, drink water. Similarly, it is difficult to find out when officers employed in execution of works misappropriate money. Indeed, in my field, legal practice, there is a common law maxim, even the devil knows not the thought of man. Kautilya would emphasize with the thought, Kautilya again draws from the world of nature, that even in the parts of birds that is flying in the sky could be discerned by the observer, but the ways of officers who hide their intentions and their actions are concealed. Kautilya warns that even the best, the brave, and the brightest can be corrupted. He wrote, perhaps poignantly, the intellect of the brave, trained to be steadfast, once corrupted, may not return without reaching the summit of corruption. In legal governance, Kautilya has much wisdom to impart. He has a Benthamite utilitarian insight into the functions of law and the administration of justice. Kautilya has a prescient understanding that the root cause of dispute and conflicts is anger. He wrote, in all cases, an offense concerning women, relatives, professional rivalries, hatred of opposing parties, or commercial or trade guilds, the origin of legal disputes is anger. Kautilya's counsel in resolving legal dispute is that it is four-legged. Kautilya wrote, a case in dispute is a four-legged. It depends, 1, what is right according to ethical principles, 2, on evidence that is on hand, 3, custom, and 4, the ruler's command. It is of interest to me as a lawyer that Kautilya is aware that there are boundary cases where the written law may collide with the ethical. In stating that where there is a conflict between established tradition and ethical principles, or between what is right according to ethical principles, then the case, Kautilya argues, shall be decided on the basis of ethical principles. It would be invidious in a session like this to question the source and criteria of these overriding ethical principles. Nonetheless, Kautilya's affirmation of the ethical, and maybe in analogy to our modern common law, the equitable, that may be a source to modify the rigor of strict legalism. A further significant maxim is in the sphere where the religious conflict with the ethical and the legal. Kautilya's subordination of even religious scriptural authority to the ethical legal is extremely commendable. Kautilya wrote, where scriptural laws conflict with what is righteous and just, there justice shall be the valid criterion. The written text loses its relevance. Now, such a principle would be an affront to many religious textual fundamentalists. But for me, as a lawyer, there is wisdom in Kautilya's intuition that primacy of justice is to be given its high place. The burden, of course, for the adjudicator or decision maker is to construe and define the content of what is just in the concrete, factual, legal matrix of the dispute. Kautilya also prized the importance of judicial independence. He wrote, punishment must be given, otherwise human community will be subject to the law of fishes, the strong predator fish swallowing the weak. And the guilty men must be removed so that guilt will again not contaminate others. He, however, commends strongly, judges ought to be impartial to all beings, trustworthy and respected by all people. Kautilya has much sage advice to powerful elites. He wrote, "The power of the ruling class, augmented by the learned ruler, buttressed by the counsel of good ministers, armed with the compliance of scriptures and sciences, triumphs and ever remains unvanquished." He continues, "A ruling family composed of indiscipline or a dissolute member, however, breaks like a moth-eaten wood." Kautilya's imagery of a moth-eaten wood is so evocative. So often in a modern nation, the exterior may be well varnished, yet its insides have been made rotten and consumed in its core, leading to its destruction of its very frame and foundations. Yes, we citizens of the 21st century and late 20th century have been witnesses to how corrupt elites destroys the very fabric and foundation of our society. So Kautilya's maxims and warnings resonate with his perennial truth across the centuries. Can Kautilya's thought be brought to us with contemporary cogency and relevance? Can a thinker or writer has an impact despite the chasm of the years? We are aware, as we commence this lecture, that Kautilya's thought was honed in the dynamic of the Mauryan dynasty and in the wake of Alexander the Conqueror the Great, destruction of the Nanda's old polity. We are also aware that the histories of nations, whether in India or in Malaysia or in our regions, have been subject of many contestation and revision. This presentation is not a place to engage in these debates. For me, Kautilya's thought has been well cited by classic writers and intellectuals like Max Weber, Hans Morgenthau. These writers have acknowledged Kautilya as a true precursor to the Enlightenment tradition of Spinoza, Hobbes, Locke, and Machiavelli in the theorizing of state polity. Indeed, Hobbesian realism in Western thought mirrors that of Kautilya's approach. The raison d'etre of the material world has its foundation from a political anthropology where men and women are subjects to a sovereign ruler. Martin Nussbaum from Harvard has characterized Arthashastra as Hindu's foundational text for political economy. Indeed, the ruler then and the ruler now in 21st century has to navigate the ship of state surely, not only for himself or his own elite or dynastic family, but for the happiness of his subjects. The translated works and thought of Kautilya has yet to reach a wide audience. For me, as an outsider of the Academy of the Indian Scholarship, my encounter with Kautilya convinces me that the statement of the great English historian, the admirer of Indian civilization, E.P. Thompson, is a valid one in application as an example of Kautilya's thought. E.P. Thompson wrote, "There is not a thought that is being thought in the West or in the East that is not active in some Indian mind. In our dream that in the global world there is a republic of letters, surely Kautilya would take its place among the great and the classics. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip Ko, for the erudite exposition on the ancient text of Kautilya's Arthashastra. On the occasion of her 75th year of independence, it is inspiring for India to be reminded of the historic and civilizing role that she has played in the enlightenment of humanity. As a legacy of India to the world, the Arthashastra will remind the world of the importance of moral leadership and India's place in it. Thank you once again for your keen attention. In our next session, Professor Emeritus Dato Dr. Haja Asma binti Haja Omar will address this subject of India's influence on the Malay language. Thank you.